We live in a world where tolerance is often mistaken for strength, where staying silent in the face of wrong is labeled as being easygoing or mature. But there comes a point when tolerance becomes dangerous, when it allows unacceptable behavior to take root and grow. That's why we need to talk about the 6 specific behaviors that should never be tolerated under any circumstances. Before we even identify them, we need to understand why drawing that line matters so much. It starts with self-respect. The standards we set for how we allow others to treat us are directly tied to how we value ourselves. If we consistently accept treatment that makes us feel small, unseen, or unworthy, we slowly begin to internalize those messages. It's not always obvious. It doesn't always come in the form of outright aggression. Sometimes it's the subtle comments that chip away at your confidence. It's the dismissive tone, the unspoken expectations, the avoidance of responsibility. Over time, these behaviors shape our environment and relationships, creating a space where toxicity becomes the norm. What's worse is that once we begin tolerating these things, others take notice. Not just the people behaving poorly, but everyone around us. Colleagues, friends, and family members learn how to treat us by watching what we allow. This isn't about being confrontational or unkind. It's about making it known that there is a standard for how you expect to be treated, and that certain behaviors will never be acceptable, no matter who they come from. Far too often, we excuse bad behavior by blaming the stress someone's under, or by convincing ourselves that it's just how they are. But that thinking is exactly what keeps the cycle going. If someone consistently disrespects you, manipulates you, lies to you, abuses their power over you, avoids accountability, or drowns you in negativity, none of that is excusable. And if we don't speak up or walk away, we send the message that this behavior is allowed, that it's okay. But it's not okay, and the consequences of ignoring these red flags are far-reaching. In the workplace, it leads to burnout, low morale, and lost productivity. In personal relationships, it creates emotional exhaustion, confusion, and fear. And internally, it erodes the very foundation of our mental health. It teaches us to shrink, to question ourselves, to tolerate less than we deserve. So before we explore the 6 specific behaviors we must never tolerate, we need to agree on one thing, that boundaries are not selfish, and expecting respect is not being difficult. We have a right and a responsibility to protect our space, our peace, and our dignity. Refusing to tolerate what is harmful isn't rude. It's healthy, it's necessary. At the heart of it, this conversation isn't just about behavior. It's about power. The power we give away when we stay silent, and the power we reclaim when we say, no more. Every time we let something slide that we know isn't right, we teach people how little we're willing to fight for ourselves. But every time we speak up, even quietly, we begin to reshape the narrative. We remind ourselves that we matter, that our voice matters. As we move forward into the specific behaviors that should never be tolerated. Remember this, setting boundaries is not about rejecting people. It's about rejecting harm. And when we do that, we make room in our lives for the kind of relationships, environments, and experiences that are rooted in respect, honesty, and accountability. Let's begin. Now that we've laid the foundation for why boundaries matter, let's begin to examine the first 3 behaviors that should never be tolerated: disrespect, manipulation, and dishonesty. These behaviors may show up in different forms, some subtle, some loud, but all of them leave a mark. All of them chip away at your sense of safety, clarity, and dignity. And the truth is, once you allow them to persist, they rarely stop. They usually grow stronger. Disrespect is often the gateway. It's one of the most common yet overlooked forms of harm in any relationship, personal or professional. It can be as overt as name, calling or yelling, or as quiet as being dismissed, interrupted, or ignored repeatedly. You may hear phrases like "don't take it so seriously" or "you're too sensitive," meant to downplay the discomfort you're feeling. But disrespect is not about tone or delivery. It's about intent. When someone consistently talks over you, mocks your ideas, or makes you feel less than, they are telling you, in their own way, that you don't matter as much as they do. And when you allow it, they keep doing it. The second unacceptable behavior is manipulation. This is a more deceptive, calculated form of control, and it often disguises itself as concern or care. Manipulators are skilled at bending truth, twisting your words, or making you feel guilty for things you shouldn't be. They shift blame, rewrite events, and slowly make you question your own memory or feelings. This is especially dangerous because it doesn't just affect how you view the other person, it affects how you view yourself. You begin to wonder if you're the problem, if you're overreacting, if maybe you are too emotional, but you're not. Manipulation thrives in silence, and the moment you recognize it for what it is, the spell starts to break. And then there's dishonesty. Trust is the foundation of every meaningful relationship, and dishonesty is its fastest destroyer. Whether it's constant lying, half-truths, or hidden agendas, dishonesty breaks down the ability to believe in someone's words and actions. Over time, it causes confusion, instability, and deep emotional harm. The worst part, dishonesty often comes with charm. People may lie to protect themselves, to get ahead, or to cover up mistakes, but no matter the reason. A pattern of dishonesty makes real connection impossible. You start questioning everything: what's real, what's not, and whether you can trust your instincts. And no relationship, no job, no family dynamic can be truly healthy when honesty is missing. These three behaviors, disrespect, manipulation, and dishonesty, are especially dangerous because they don't always scream for attention. Sometimes they creep in quietly, disguised as personality quirks or temporary moods, but the longer they go unchecked, the more damage they cause. That's why recognizing them early and naming them clearly is so important. It's not about labeling people as bad. It's about recognizing harmful patterns and refusing to accept them in your space. You deserve to be heard without being mocked, to be supported without being controlled, and to be told the truth without conditions. You have a right to expect basic decency and honesty in every relationship you invest in. When someone consistently shows you that they cannot or will not meet those standards, it is not your job to fix them. It is your job to protect yourself. So as we move forward, let these first three behaviors be non-negotiables. When you sense disrespect, call it out. When you feel manipulated, take a step back and reassess. When you catch dishonesty, confront it or walk away. These moments may not be easy, but they are necessary because what you tolerate is what you invite, and you deserve better than that. Having understood the harm caused by disrespect, manipulation, and dishonesty, it's time to turn our attention to the next three unacceptable behaviors: abuse of power, lack of accountability, and toxic negativity. These are often more deeply rooted and sometimes more difficult to confront, especially when they come from authority figures, longtime friends, or even family members. But just like the first three, they must never be tolerated. Abuse of power is a dangerous behavior because it's built on control and fear. It shows up in many places at work, in relationships, in community spaces. It happens when someone uses their position, influence, or authority to intimidate, suppress, or exploit others. They may use their role to silence your voice, override your decisions, or make you feel like you owe them something. It can be a manager who constantly threatens your job, a partner who controls your finances, or even a friend who uses guilt and loyalty as tools to keep you submissive. This kind of behavior is not always loud or violent. It can be subtle, systematic, and incredibly damaging over time. And what makes it even harder is that it often hides behind the idea of leadership, guidance, or what's best for you. But leadership does not require fear. Influence does not excuse control. Real power uplifts, it doesn't suppress. Equally harmful is a lack of accountability. This is the behavior of someone who refuses to own their actions. They never apologize, never acknowledge their mistakes, and always find a way to blame others. You'll often hear phrases like, "That's not my fault," or "You're making a big deal out of nothing." These individuals often twist situations to make themselves look like the victim, no matter how clear the facts are. And over time, their refusal to take responsibility wears you down. It forces you to carry the weight of problems you didn't cause, to clean up messes you didn't create, and to constantly second-guess your version of events. In relationships, this leads to deep resentment. In the workplace, it creates a culture of fear and blame where progress is impossible. Everyone makes mistakes, but accountability is what allows growth. Without it, there is only stagnation and repeated harm. Then there's toxic negativity, the subtle poison in many conversations and environments. This behavior isn't just about having a bad day or venting once in a while. We all do that. Toxic negativity is persistent, habitual, and contagious. It's the constant complaining without action, the relentless criticism of others, the refusal to see any good in a situation. These individuals drain your energy, your hope, and your enthusiasm. They shoot down your ideas, mock your optimism, and often mask their pessimism as realism. But the truth is, their words shape the mood and direction of any space they occupy. And when you're constantly surrounded by that negativity, it can begin to affect how you see the world and yourself. It becomes harder to stay motivated, to take risks, or to believe that things can get better. And that's why it must be addressed and removed when it becomes a pattern. These three behaviors, abuse of power, lack of accountability, and toxic negativity, often operate in the background of our lives. They don't always make a scene, but their impact is deep and long-lasting. To tolerate them is to accept a slow erosion of your confidence, your energy, and your potential. We must be courageous enough to call them out, strong enough to walk away when they persist, and wise enough to recognize that peace should never come at the cost of enduring these patterns. And when we refuse to accept these behaviors, we not only protect ourselves, we also make it safer for others to do the same. Understanding what not to tolerate is only half the battle. The real question becomes, what happens when we do tolerate these unacceptable behaviors? What is the cost of keeping the peace at the expense of our own well-being? We often think that ignoring certain actions is the easier route, avoiding confrontation, minimizing conflict, maintaining the illusion of harmony. But the truth is, the long-term consequences of tolerating disrespect, manipulation, dishonesty, abuse of power, lack of accountability, and toxic negativity are far more damaging than any momentary discomfort confrontation may bring. First and foremost, the impact is deeply personal. Tolerating these behaviors chips away at your mental health. It begins with doubt, doubting your feelings, your perception, your worth. Over time, you become emotionally exhausted, constantly questioning yourself, walking on eggshells or worse, blaming yourself for the way others treat you. The stress of enduring toxic behavior silently can lead to anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, and burnout. The energy spent managing someone else's dysfunction is energy taken away from your own growth and happiness. You lose sleep, joy, and peace trying to maintain a situation that is fundamentally unhealthy. Beyond the personal toll, tolerating unacceptable behavior damages relationships. Whether in the workplace or at home, it creates a culture of silence and fear. Others begin to notice the dynamics, but they stay quiet too, assuming nothing will change. Trust erodes, communication breaks down, resentment builds. In a professional setting, productivity drops because people are too busy managing emotions and avoiding conflict to focus on meaningful work. In personal relationships, closeness fades because one or both parties no longer feel emotionally safe. The behavior you allow becomes the behavior others adapt to or adopt themselves, and then there's the ripple effect. When one person tolerates harmful behavior, it sends a message to others. This is acceptable here. A toxic culture doesn't happen overnight. It builds one silent nod at a time, one avoided confrontation at a time. What starts as a single person's poor behavior can become the standard, influencing how others act and respond. This is how workplaces become hostile, how friendships become draining, and how families carry dysfunction across generations. Tolerating what's wrong doesn't stop the cycle, it feeds it. One of the most heartbreaking consequences of tolerating unacceptable behavior is the way it reshapes your identity. The more you allow, the more you adapt. You learn to lower your expectations. You teach yourself not to speak up. You begin to shrink, to play small, to hope that being less visible will somehow protect you, but it never does. You can't make yourself invisible enough to escape mistreatment. In fact, shrinking often invites more of it. When you minimize your needs to accommodate others, you slowly forget that those needs ever mattered to begin with. But it's never too late to change that. Recognizing the cost of tolerance doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're ready to reclaim your space. It means you understand that protecting your peace is not about avoiding discomfort. It's about building a life where your well-being, your voice, and your values come first. Saying no more is not a betrayal of others, it's a promise to yourself. The decision to no longer tolerate what is unacceptable is an act of courage. It doesn't mean you have to fight every battle or confront every person. Sometimes it means quietly stepping away. Sometimes it means setting clear limits. But every step you take in the direction of self-respect shifts the balance within you and around you. You do not owe anyone your silence in exchange for being treated poorly. Once we've identified the unacceptable behaviors and understood the damage they cause both to ourselves and to the environments we live and work in, the next step is crucial, learning how to respond. It's not enough to simply recognize what's wrong. We must also equip ourselves with the tools to stand up, step back, and speak out. Because while knowing is power, acting on that knowledge is where transformation begins. The first step in responding is recognition. That might sound simple, but in practice, it's not. Many of us have spent years normalizing behaviors that hurt us. We've told ourselves that disrespect is just someone's sense of humor, that manipulation is love in disguise, that dishonesty is just human imperfection. But when you begin to really see these behaviors for what they are, when you strip away the excuses, you create the space for truth. And once you recognize what's happening, you can begin to reclaim your power. After recognition comes naming. This step is difficult because it requires courage. Naming a behavior means confronting it head on, whether that's in a conversation with someone else or within your own internal dialogue. It's about saying, this is not okay. This is not how I deserve to be treated. You don't need to be loud to be firm. You don't need to be angry to be strong. Clear, honest communication is one of the most powerful tools you have. Whether you're telling someone how their words made you feel or explaining a boundary you're setting, the act of naming the behavior stops the cycle of silence. But not every situation is safe or appropriate for confrontation, and that's where boundaries come in. A boundary isn't a punishment, it's protection. It's a way of saying, here is where I end and you begin. Boundaries are not meant to push people away. They're meant to protect your peace, your time, your emotional well-being. Setting a boundary could mean refusing to engage in arguments, stepping away from toxic conversations, declining tasks that exploit you, or distancing yourself from people who repeatedly cross the line. The key is consistency. A boundary only works if it's maintained. You teach people how to treat you by what you allow, but you also teach them by what you consistently enforce. Support is another essential part of the process. You don't have to face these situations alone. Whether it's talking to a trusted friend, seeking professional guidance, or joining a community that validates your experience, support strengthens you. It reminds you that your feelings are real and your decisions are valid. There is immense power in hearing someone say, I went through that too, and you're not crazy for walking away. Most importantly, responding to unacceptable behavior means refusing to normalize it. We often grow up learning to tolerate dysfunction, sometimes from people we love deeply. And that makes it harder to challenge those patterns as adults. But healing requires honesty. You cannot protect your peace while justifying the actions that rob you of it. You cannot claim your worth while staying silent in the face of harm. Refusing to normalize destructive behavior is not about being judgmental. It's about choosing a healthier, more honest life. This isn't always easy. In fact, sometimes it's incredibly hard. You may lose people. You may face resistance. But what you gain clarity, freedom, peace, self-respect, is worth every step. Because once you begin to act in alignment with your values, everything else in your life begins to change. Your relationships improve, your confidence grows, and you start attracting what you actually deserve. The behaviors we refuse to tolerate define the standards we live by.